Morning everyone. This is another one of the pre-recorded videos, so I am not live. I mean, I am alive, but I'm not live today. So I hope that you're able to see it as normal and everything is working fine. I hope you enjoyed last week's Jacobite talk. As I've said on previous occasions, and I will continue to do so just in case there's anybody new who's not been watching these before now. My name is Lorna. I'm the Community Engagement Officer at the Highland Archive Centre. I mean, I suppose probably I didn't need to tell you my name given the title of the session, but my job is to do anything at all that engages people with the collections that we care for at the Highland Archive Service. As I've said previously, we have 4 offices around the Highlands. We have one in Inverness, one in Fort William, one in Portree, and one in Wick. And together they make up the Highland Archive Service collections, and they look after all sorts of awesome documents and things that tell stories of the Highlands past and the Highlands present, and in the future we'll be keeping memories of this time. This week we're looking at health, and again, as I've said previously, if you want to look back at the previous subjects, then you can do that on the High Life Highland YouTube channel or on the Highland Archive Centre Facebook page, and please do that, and please do have a look at the activities that we've prepared for the previous sessions. This week we're looking at the subject of health and well-being. I don't know about you, in my 36 years, so I'll just tell you that because I've made the mistake before of asking school children how old they think I am, so I'll just tell you. I have never heard the words healthcare systems, doctors, medics, all of those things mentioned as much as they are at the moment. And it's quite strange for us to be living in a time where we're not all in the same boat, but we're all surrounded by the same kind of words at the moment. We're hearing a lot about healthcare, doctors, medical systems, healthcare networks, things like that. Obviously here in the UK we're hearing a lot about the NHS. We probably all know more now about personal protective equipment and ventilators than we all ever thought we would. We mark in the UK, and I know in other countries as well, we do our clap for carers on a Thursday night when we're acknowledging the work of our healthcare workers and how much they are supporting us and looking after us at the moment with this epidemic that's going on. So yeah, words like epidemic, pandemic, virus, infection, all of those things are surrounding us at the moment. So I just thought this would be a good time to talk to you about healthcare records, about some of the awesome things we look after on behalf of NHS Highland. The other side to that is that at the moment we are all trying, some of us unsuccessfully, to stay fit at home, which is difficult. I have a core trainer that I look at on a daily basis, and as yet it has not made me thin. So yeah, health is in our minds in a lot of ways at the moment. And also there's a lot of mention, certainly I know there will be people watching this in different countries, but certainly in the UK news there's a lot of talk at the moment about mental health as well, and about how important it is to try and keep your mental health in good shape while you're keeping your physical health in good shape while we're going through a difficult time. So I wanted to try and think about all of the things that make up good health and well-being. So obviously there's physical health in terms of fitness, but also in terms of staying healthy, taking care of your body, good diet, things like that. There's mental health, there's emotional health. There's so many things that we need to do or should do or can do to improve our health. So as I said, we look after, at the Highland Archive Centre in Inverness, the NHS Highland collections, the Highland Health Board, and they are a very rich series of records. There's all sorts of amazing things, and one of the things, if you have watched me talk over the previous weeks, that you'll know I talk about a lot is awesome stories, and the NHS records are full of awesome stories. But what I don't know, if you will have known, is that the Highlands has often been at the forefront of medicine and medical care and medical treatment. Sometimes we're seen as being, rural or further away. Well, obviously we are further away from the central belt and the seats of government, but we've had an awesome history of healthcare in this part of the world, and so I wanted to tell you a little bit about some of that. So I'm going to touch on the Highlands and Islands Medical Service, which I'll explain to you, physical health, other things that contribute to physical health, and mental health, and how those things are reflected in the collections that we look after. For those of you who don't know, the collections we look after are all archival, so original documents telling the story of the history of the Highlands. So first of all, we're going to look at the Highlands and Islands Medical Service. This I'll refer to as we go through as the Highlands and Islands Medical Service and the Juror Committee, and I'll explain why in a second. So this is in a setting of no free healthcare. So if people wanted to go to the doctor 100 years ago in this country, in the UK, then they had to pay for their doctor's treatment, and so a lot of people didn't go to the doctor. They just couldn't afford it, so a lot of people died with no doctor present or nobody checking. Maybe they had something that could easily have been prevented, but they couldn't afford to have a doctor. So in 1911, which is obviously over 100 years ago now, a law was passed which was called the National Insurance Act. This law did various things, but one of the things that it did was give people health insurance and sick pay. So it was mainly targeted at the industrial kind of sector, and people who worked in those sorts of jobs. If they fell ill, they would pay in through the year. They would pay in a certain amount of money, their employer would pay in a certain amount of money, and the government would pay in. And so if they were sick, they would have insurance that would pay their sick pay for them. It was in a whole load of reforms at that time, social reforms, changing the way that the country operated. So anyway, it was a great act, and it did a lot of good for a lot of people, but it didn't cover crofters and various certain other people, because they didn't fit into the category that they needed to. And so you can imagine for the Highlands that was quite a lot of the population who weren't covered by this act. And so a committee was set up to see what could be done about it and how could they make a system that would support those people as well. And that committee was chaired by Sir John Juror, which is why it gets called the Juror Committee. And they went round the Highlands, the group of the committee went round the Highlands asking people about health, asking them about their diet, about what they knew about healthcare, how they could access healthcare, had they ever seen a doctor, where was their nearest hospital, all sorts of things like that. And they asked 178 different witnesses across the Highlands, from crofters and fishermen to doctors and lawyers and nurses and all sorts of different people who they asked about this. And they found some extraordinary information. So they learnt how far doctors would travel. So there was various doctors saying, if I want to go and see people in this village, I need to get a horse and cart, and then I need to get a boat, and then I need to walk, and altogether it's 25 miles of a journey with no car. So they found out things like that. They found out that there were places that just had no access to doctors. So some of the islands, by the time they could tell a doctor on the mainland that they needed help and the doctor could get to them, the person had maybe died anyway, or had become very seriously ill. They spoke to people who were too poor to see a doctor, who just said, well, I won't call a doctor because I can't afford to pay for them. And they found some evidence about people living in terrible conditions, in muddy houses with disease in the house, walking in mud on their floor. It was damp. They describe one house as damp oozing through the roof. There's one very moving bit in the evidence where they meet somebody who says the mothers who have babies are so hungry that they can't produce enough milk to breastfeed their babies, and they don't want to use the calf's milk for their babies, because the cow's milk for their babies, because they'd rather feed that to the calves, because they'd rather have the animals than be able to support their own children. So really difficult things to read and to hear, especially it's only 100 years ago. That's not that long. I know it seems a long time ago to some of you, but in the scale of documents we look after, it's not that long ago. They also found some people who still believed in almost magical treatments. People who said the way to cure epilepsy was that they'd heard the way to cure epilepsy was to bury a live cockerel under your doorstep, and that would solve everything. So this showed them that there was a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of problems around the Highlands of healthcare. They also found out that some nurses were only getting 3 months training. There were not many midwives, so a lot of babies were dying when they were being born because there was just nobody there who knew how to help. So a lot of shocking things that they discovered, particularly at a time when, the rest of the country was moving ahead with healthcare. And so, in December 1912, on Christmas Eve actually, I think, they published their report of their findings, and let me just make sure I get my figure right here. 23,558 paragraphs of evidence of people that they had spoken to asking for information. And so they published their report in December 1912. It shocked the government so much, the government couldn't believe that these things were happening, that they immediately decided to make a change. And one thing that's really quite powerful that the Juror report said in it was that they believed that the principle of healthcare is a basic human right, regardless of income, class, or geography. So the principle of being able to access healthcare is a human right. So that's a pretty big, powerful thing to say. And so they recommended that there was a grant given, there was money given to the Highlands to develop all the medical services in the Highlands and Islands. So they wanted money to go to employ doctors, to train nurses, to open hospitals, to improve communication so that people could contact a doctor, to provide ambulances, all sorts of different things. And what was amazing was that the government immediately just said, yes, we'll do it. And it was passed very, very quickly, which any of the adults watching will know is fairly unusual. Although not during the strange times we're living in now. But yes, so the government immediately said, right, we'll do this because we can't have this happening. And so the Highlands and Islands Medical Service was formed. It changed a lot of things, and I'm not going to go into them all, but one of the things they did was give doctors wages. So rather than everybody having to, the doctors surviving on who could afford to pay them, the doctors got wages, which meant that they could afford to go and see the people who were poorer. There were hospitals established, and there's some pictures of those up on the website for you to have a look at. And the Highlands and Islands Medical Service became the first state-provided healthcare system in the world, which is awesome. It's awesome. We did an amazing thing before anybody else did it here in the Highlands. And we should be really, really proud of that, and not enough people know about it. And what happened was that then the Highlands and Islands had better healthcare than anywhere else did. So having, the report, the committee was set up to investigate because we were so far behind in the Highlands, and then in quite a short amount of time, the Highlands and Islands had better healthcare than the rest of the UK, and they were catching us up. And so the Highlands and Islands Medical Service was the forerunner to the NHS. So when the NHS was founded in 1948, it was based on the model of the Highlands and Islands Medical Service, which is awesome. So that's one thing I want to tell you about. And when you go on to have a look at their website, which I hope you will do, there's a booklet all about the Highlands and Islands Medical Service, the Juror Committee, how they gathered their evidence, all sorts of things. And I've made a quiz, so please do my quiz, of things about the Juror Committee. I would also really recommend going to have a look at our website, Ambala, which has got a whole display about the Highlands and Islands Medical Service on there as well. So that's the first thing I want to tell you about. The second thing is to think about other things to do with physical health. As I said, we hold amazing records on behalf of NHS Highland, and they record all sorts of operations that people have had, treatments and things like that. I think we've talked before in previous weeks about how some records are what's called closed because of data protection, so they might have a lot of personal information. So medical records are one of those things that you can't see them beyond 1920 at the moment. That was me forgetting which year we're actually in. you can only see earlier ones than that, just to protect people's personal details. But yeah, we hold all sorts of health records to do with physical health. The other thing, though, I think that we need to think about is it's not just, health isn't just about medical things, it's about diet. And one of the things we have is diet leaflets from the NHS over the years of what people are recommending is, you know, a safe amount of alcohol, or how many, you know, getting your 5 a day, things like that. But also, it's bigger than that. What else makes up good physical health? You need to keep fit. We have collections of things like football teams or cricket clubs, things like that, of people trying to keep fit and healthy. And there's some of those up on our website for you to look at. There's a cracking photo of a curling match in Fort William, which I would recommend you go and have a look at. Every time we put it on Facebook, everybody loves it, so please go and have a wee look at that. And there's photos of football teams, things like that for you to look at. And one of the activities that I have put down for you to have a think about is a spider diagram of health, and how many things do you think contribute to good health? Obviously things like diet and keeping fit, but what else contributes to good health? And I'll come back to that in a wee second. The other thing I want to just touch on is mental health. The NHS Highland collections that we look after include the most, I'm trying not to use the word awesome again because I know I do it all the time, the most phenomenal collections to do with Craigdenane, which was the Inverness District Asylum. So that was where people who were mad, or who were thought to be mad, or had something, some kind of mental affliction of some kind, were in the asylum. Now again, it was the third district asylum to be set up in Scotland, and it was, again, forward looking. When it opened, it was an amazing place. It opened in 1864. It had no boundary wall. It had sports teams. It had an orchestra. They believed in giving people jobs to do that would help them. They believed in art therapy, things like that, from a really early date. It's a very forward-looking place to put people in when they weren't well. There's all sorts of amazing stories in there, and I hope when we're open again that you can come in and see them, because they're so amazing. Most of the things we see people in Craigdenane for are things that we would still recognise today. So things like drinking too much alcohol, which has triggered a mental health imbalance, losing someone in their family, so a death, a divorce, things like that you would still see now would be a reason for people to be struggling. There are some different ones, but not many, really. There are not many things in there that don't make sense. There is someone in there for excessive tea drinking, but when you go to her case notes, it does also say that she was worshipping the devil, which I feel is a classic example of getting your priorities wrong. So yeah, those records are amazing, and they show how our development of mental health care has changed, so how we've started to understand mental health care, and how we've started to put things in place, how being in a routine can be helpful to people, how having some work to do to get to a goal can be helpful for people. All of those things appear in those amazing records. One of the other things that we've put up on the website for you to look at are some earlier mental health records. So I said that Craigdenane opened in 1864. There's a great picture of it on our website, do have a look at it. But before that, when there were not kind of state asylums like that, people who were mad, or were thought to be mad, and you have to forgive the terminology of kind of going back a few hundred years, would either be put into a private asylum, so there would be a private doctor who would look after them, and that's the case for William Bailey. I'll tell you about William in a second, we love William. Or in the case of somebody called Angus Smith, which again that document is up there for you to have a look at, he was from Arisaig, and he was thought to be mad and dangerous, and he attacked people, and they just didn't know what else to do with him, so they put him in prison because they didn't know how to look after him. They didn't have a dedicated place to look after people who had a mental health problem, and so he was just locked up in prison, and there's a copy of that document for you to have a look at there as well. That's from the 1700s. William Bailey, he was from a wealthy family, and so he was able to be put into a private health asylum where he was looked after by a professional who was trying to fix his mental health problems. But his story is amazing. He had travelled to Iraq and all sorts of different places, Persia as Iran was known at the time, studying languages. We don't know what happened to him. He maybe got sunstroke, something like that. But anyway, for whatever reason, his family started to believe that he had gone insane, and so he got brought back and was put in the care of various private asylums until eventually he came back up here. But the awesome thing, I've said awesome again, sorry, the amazing thing about William is that he wrote phonetically, but not all the time. And that means that he would write as he heard things. So he would spell things as they sounded, but not all the time. Sometimes in between he would write completely normal letters in completely standard English, but then in between he would write these letters that were spelled out as he heard things. And it's amazing because even the envelopes are addressed like that, and so you can see that he's spelled out how he thinks the address sounds, and they've obviously got there because they've survived and we've got them. So we don't know if he did that because he was a language student, that's what he had travelled to Persia for. So we don't know if he did that because he was interested in languages, or if he was going a bit mad, or we just don't know. But one of those letters is up on the website for you to have a look at, and it's amazing. Do have a look. Try and read it first before you look at the transcript. And if you can't read it by just looking at it, try and say it out loud, and you'll soon realise that saying it out loud makes much more sense because that's how he wrote it. So those are there for you to have a look at. There's also some documents there to do with traditional beliefs in health and healing. A storyboard about the work of Mary Beath, who was wrote about herbal medicines and things like that. There's a storyboard there all about her work, and a picture of a Clootie well. And again, anyone watching from within the Highlands may well have been to a Clootie well. There's a lot of them about here. And that was where there's a few different beliefs about what it was, but one of the beliefs is that if you soaked a cloth, that's what a clout is, in the water of the well, and then if you were ill, washed yourself down with it and then hung it up at the well, that as the cloth disintegrated, so the illness would leave you. But there's different variations about why people did that, but there's a picture of a Clootie well up for you to have a look at, and also just have a look generally in the Highlands, and I think all the Celtic countries do it, Wales and places as well, so have a wee look about that as well, and about how we, the different things that people believe and have believed that can influence health. So there's all sorts of things. So as I said, there's all kinds of activities on the website for you to have a look at. There are the spider diagrams about what makes up good health, and I think broader than you would normally. In my opinion, diet is important, fitness is important, she says, but also things like having friends is important, having conversation is important, being honest, talking through problems, fresh air, learning new things, really good for mental health. So all sorts of different things. And again, if you're doing those activities, please do tag us in them, HLH Learn with Lorna, so that we can see what you're doing and whether you're engaging and interested in the things that we're talking about. I hope you can join us next Thursday at 11 o'clock. We'll be looking at education records. So there's some amazing stories in education, as you'll have guessed from my entire way of being. There are amazing stories in all of our collections. So I hope you can join us next week as well.